the meeting notice so I can read it. Well, why don't I get started? I'll read the meeting notice and call the roll, and hopefully Member Parks will be along by the time we're done. Okay, so please be advised that on Wednesday, May 6th at 4:30, there'll be a strategic planning subcommittee meeting held through remote participation via Zoom. The meeting is being recorded. The meeting can be viewed live on Medford Public Schools YouTube channel, through Medford Community Media on your local cable channel, which is Comcast 9, 8, or 22, and Verizon 43, 45, or 47. Since the meeting will be held remotely, participants can log or call in using the following call-in number. The Zoom meeting ID is 915-2577-1727. Questions can be submitted during the meeting by emailing Jenny Graham at medford.k12.ma.us. And those submitting must include first and last name, Medford street address, and question or comment. I will call the roll. Member Reinfeld.
Present.
Member Parks is coming along, and then Member Graham here. So two are present, one is
There
absent.
she is.
Oh,
Nope.
here she comes.
Maybe you should call the roll again.
Where'd she go? She's joining. We'll give her just a second. Hello, Member Parks. We were just calling the roll, and I assume you're here. Here. Okay, so our agenda for today is based on the resolution that Member Reinfeld offered, which says, whereas members of the Medford community have provided input into the strategic planning process via survey and focus groups, and whereas the Medford School Committee has identified a permanent superintendent for the district, and whereas the Medford Comprehensive High School Building Committee has submitted its educational plan to the Massachusetts School Building Authority, and whereas the district is convening a dedicated task force to address overcrowding in the elementary schools and examine the viability of a 5, 6, and 7, 8 model for MPS middle schools. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Strategic Planning Subcommittee shall meet to establish the process, deliverables, and timeline for the development and review of the community-informed strategic plan. So that's our agenda for today. So I think we weren't necessarily looking to like finish or finalize anything, but more talk about like what are the milestones and thoughts on next steps that we can take. And I will start by saying one thing that I think would be helpful to do is for us to take the survey results that we received and produce some kind of like report from this committee that says like here's the input that we received based on these questions, and just to be able to like boil it up in some salient way as like perhaps like a handoff to the school team to say like this is sort of the summary of feedback. But I'm totally open to whatever approaches that we collectively want to take to think through this. And I am assuming, Dr. Galusi, this also ties to your new superintendent induction program. So yeah, I'm just curious what everyone is thinking about in terms of like what the right next steps are and like how this timeline would like lay on top of all the other things that we're doing in the district as well. So I'll stop talking.
So I absolutely intended for the survey results to be summarized, compiled, uh, themes pulled out. My thought was that between that and then compiling any other assets we have, things like the instructional vision, portrait of graduate, the values work that all the different schools have been doing, um, to any extent that the high school educational plan should be a part of it. I don't think that should be the main driver, but a lot of work went into that and a lot of thoughtfulness both for the high school, but I think it does reflect some of the larger district pieces. But really all of those, what are the common themes of all of those documents and that community input? I think that informs district-wide goals, which I think this committee ought to, and this group of people, not just the committee, but in partnership, those goals should be defined. And then from there, I think those turn into um, objectives that are more department specific or school specific, grade specific. What are the actual things that we're achieving? And then from there, certainly the school team is going to be looking at metrics and milestones. But I think in terms of that, the survey and then all of those other assets, what are the things that we know that we believe about our district and that we want to see about our district? When we met in October, we talked about the vision statement for the district and potentially revising that. I think some of that work was going to happen in the focus groups, which had limited turnout. I think most people really preferred to provide their community input through the survey. And then the other piece that I thought was a groundwork setting was looking at a couple other district strategic plans just to say, what do we like about this? I remember Graham, you mentioned like Lexington painted this really beautiful picture of rooted in history and current values and what that is. I think it was Salem did a strategic, anyway, I think there are some strategic plans out there that we might just want to look at and say, yeah, these are the components we definitely want to include. But gathering those, pull out the themes, set the goals, and then start drilling down into what this looks like. And I would really welcome the input around the timeline for those different steps. I would certainly like to see us pull themes and just articulate what came out of the survey before the end of the school year. I know we all have a lot going on and it is Maycember, but getting those, and it feels a little bit like summer might be a time that might be more conducive to diving deeper. But I will ask what seems like a reasonable time frame.
So I think the only thing I would probably add to a lot of this, I think a lot of what has been said has been conversations that the team on our side has been having. I know I've mentioned it before, but the Medford High School has participated for the past 2 years. We've been the wonderful recipients of a bar foundation grant, which has really been the catalyst for a lot of the instructional work that we've been doing around the district. We are now going through the process to have another iteration of bar funding to help us continue that work. Yes, at the high school, but district-wide. This is a slightly different grant. This is called Meeting the Moment. We're in a cohort. This grant is very specifically targeted to the work that we're doing across the district. So part of our proposal for this grant funding, which we won't find out about until June, we have our fingers crossed in a very positive way. But in a lot of the conversations and work that we've been doing collaboratively on this side, through that proposal, we have put in a piece to have some technical assistance, like consultant, to help us with this work. I think it would be very helpful to the consultant knows the work that we've been doing. My interim report on findings and my self-evaluation very much framed a lot of the work that we've been doing here around belonging, consistency, coherence. That is a structure we would like to see the strategic plan be framed. That is a lot of the work that we've been doing on this side. So having a technical assistance partner, one that is familiar with the work we've been doing, one that's been with us to help us manage the structure will just free up, I think, a lot of the bandwidth for the team on this end, especially with to the point in the resolution about the task forces and the MSBA and just a lot of the continued work in the district, so that we're able to really focus on the content and providing our expertise to the content, and really, as you said, Member Reinfeld, kind of like digging into what the goals and the objectives and the metrics. We don't want to have anything on there that is not measurable. So I think partnering with someone would help us tremendously as we kind of engage in this, and we're thinking the same way you are in terms of at least the initial timeline, where I think the summer is a great time to really kind of at least lay out the overall structure, and early June is when we find out about the grant. So happy. Yep.
I do think before the school year is over, I think it's reasonable for us to get a draft of the survey findings together. That seems doable. And that would position us well to, like, fingers crossed, to like be able to sort of take off from there in the summer with all the other assets, and hopefully with the support of this grant that would help us do that.
Much agreed.
Yeah, that would be great. There's always the question with strategic planning of, do you bring in a consultant or not? And so if that can be built into this grant, I'll cross my fingers as well.
And if we are thinking about that kind of timeline, so we can summarize the feedback survey by the end of the school year, and then get started on the work in the summer. Are we thinking that like a strategic plan would be drafted? Like, I don't have a sense of like what kind of timeline you all are thinking about. And then I guess we can talk about how does it like match all these other timelines.
I think that second part is really the piece to kind of dig into. In just a very preliminary conversation that Kim and the team and I have had over on this side is, I think some would depend a little bit, but on the technical partner, assistance partner. However, it's one that we would like to use when we've already been partnered with, because we could hit the ground running.
Yes.
So I would assume, to be thoughtful yet aggressive, maybe like if we're doing this work, if we're getting ourselves situated in the summer so that we're doing the bulk of this work in the fall, then I think, January, February feels right.
Okay.
To be finished.
And is that finished with a full plan, or is that laying out, I guess the summer laying out, because I see it, we're laying out the vision for the district and the broad goals of what we want to accomplish, that everything kind of maps to those, and say, in support of the goals, we're going to accomplish these things in the area of operations, in instruction.
Correct.
And so I think coming up with that big vision statement and broad district-wide goals, that every objective we have supports those goals. You're saying that would be the work of the summer, and then diving into what the objectives and.
I think that would be the work Yeah, I think I want to take the consultant's pace on that because one of the benefits of
Okay.
hiring a consultant is that they're able to gather like really meaningful feedback from lots of stakeholders who are experts in their own experience. And so I think that might take more than just the summer, but once you have those things laid out, the internal team in Medford is really solution oriented. And so I think the goals are the hard part. I think the metrics are the next most difficult part, and then the action items just kind of come together. But in my experience, it's kind of organic. And so setting like project benchmarks along the way doesn't necessarily always work. So I guess what I would say is it would be reasonable to anticipate February landed with goals and metrics and strategies.
One question I had around that is I feel like people are getting interview fatigue. Like people have been providing input, they've been talking about what they want to see. They've been obviously more so at the high school, but I do think we've had a lot of these conversations and we have a lot of this information. And I wonder if it would be more respectful of people's time to say, here is a draft vision goals and let people respond to something concrete rather than trying to build it again from scratch. I feel like we have so many pieces between the instructional visions and the school values and the community feedback. We've asked people a lot of these questions already, and I think it might feel more productive to have them respond to here's what we heard and what we think this looks like and something that feels right to us. Does it feel right to you? I can be talked out of that, but
No, we don't disagree. We don't disagree. We actually had that pretty much identical conversation, Member Reinfeld, because even for just all of the shifts in leadership, every one came with an interview. So we
Yep.
do have a lot of recent input and data between my transition and a lot of community events between the MSBA. You are right. There's a multitude of data sources that we have at our fingertips, and I think it would be much better served to provide a framework that people are responding to rather than like the openness of how do you want this to look or what are your specific pieces on that. I think it would be much better feedback if they're responding to a framework.
If we are talking about a consultant, though, I do think a good consultant is not going to reinvent the wheel. A bad consultant is going to reinvent the wheel.
100%.
And a good consultant, but a good consultant is going to like repeat the things that are worth repeating because there's strategic value to like the exercise. And sometimes that feels like we're doing the same thing again, but usually it's because there's like a different intended outcome. So I feel like less strongly about like being positioned about like not repeating things because a good consultant repeats things strategically to build consensus, to like really get to the meat of something, to like push on like clear assumptions people are making that may not hold up. Like there's a lot of reasons why people do those things. So that doesn't bother me so much. I mean, if it's a bad consultant, it's a bad consultant, and that bothers me, like just sort of in a global way. But I think, whoever this is coming in, like they're gonna read everything. They're gonna dive in and they're gonna ask questions of a smaller group of people before they sort of take their show on the road. But they are like, for them to do their best work, they're gonna have to talk to people. And I think we just have to be okay with that. To some, like to some degree.
Yeah.
Member Parks, did you have?
I was just going to say, but it would be in that context. It would be like we're gathering additional because we found X, Y, or Z, and we need to kind of dig deeper. So I think that it would be kind of within that context. Like we wouldn't necessarily have a framework laid out per se for them to respond to, but it would be kind of in the context of we've honed in on this and we need to now dig deeper, I think, in that situation, which I think, people get that.
Well, and I think there's more than likely lots of conflict in the data that we have, right? Like if you talk to 100 people, they're not
Oh,
all
yeah.
gonna like agree on the same premise. So if you have like big swaths of people who have different opinions about the same thing, like that means something, and like you have to resolve for that before you can like really like go forward. But I do think like timeline wise, thinking about being able to get started in summer and conclude at some point in like January or February before budget season feels like the right timeline for this as like a standalone project. And I guess the second question is like, what about like how does this match like the middle school work?
The other thing I just wanted to say too, in terms of like the digging deeper, I was also very transparent in our data set, right? It does not reflect all voices. So the one thing in this, in terms of digging deeper, is also to make sure that we're approaching the work so that we're capturing the voices of Medford. So in terms of the task force work, I think that's maybe a little difficult to pin down right now. We had our first meeting, our introductory meeting. Everyone's very well resourced with all materials, so they can kind of see the report that was provided by HMFH. Our next meeting is next week, and we will be taking that meeting at the Andrews Middle School. And it will include a little bit of a tour of the Andrews Middle School, maybe some of the constraints and possible opportunities. So I think it's a little hard to gauge what the total timeline would be. We talked a little bit about, I think there's like two pieces running here when we're talking about the task force. There's the grade configuration of 5, 6, 7, 8, and then there's also the middle school model, the team model. And so both of those things need to kind of be points of conversation regardless, just to see how the paths go. So if we're not able to really fully engage in the grade configuration, there's still the model to kind of vet out a little bit. So I would anticipate, I think it feels very safe to say that those timeframes are somewhat aligned. I don't know what Member Parks, how you feel about that task force timeline. We're a little early still.
We're a little early. I mean, I think it depends on the team, but I think it could be, barring anything that comes up. I mean, there are some big decisions, I think, that could change that. And some of it truly is what comes out of, a big question is, what does fifth grade look like? And what does fifth grade look like creates two different space needs, I think. And that's been flagged. And so it's going down kind of two separate paths in a sense until that determination is made.
I think it's really likely we're going to have a hole in this middle school aspect of it. And I'm nervous about delaying the whole process because of that. I don't want to do that, but I recognize that whatever's decided around middle school is going to have some impact on the other pieces of before middle school, after middle school, and we are all part of one district together. Because the task force is currently still in the can we actually do this? And we're talking about should we do this, but really we're in the can we phase rather than the how. But I think it is reasonable once we kind of get past the, yes, is this possible? And do we want to really explore it? I think it is reasonable to ask the task force, looking at who's on there, of what are the guiding principles in making these decisions. And I think those guiding principles do inform the strategic plan. And I think if we haven't done that by the fall or in early fall, we're the task force will be too. I think that's a natural part of what will happen with the task force in the fall, is those, like, what do we want to keep in mind? There's a lot of logistical questions, but the, like, what are we trying to achieve? What are our goals for middle school students should come out of that before we
But-
start really diving into the exactly what will it look like.
But also, and maybe I'm thinking of this wrong, but wouldn't these higher level elements of the strategic plan help inform, should we be doing it at all once we kind of figure out what it is? Because it's identifying if it's possible. If it's possible, we identify, okay, how to go about it. And then once we figure that out, it's, should we do it? But that should we do it then ties back to kind of the higher up, the mission, vision.
Yeah, does this support
Does
our
this
district
support
goals?
our higher level part of the strategic plan? So we would need that in place to be able to say, should we, right? Or am I thinking about that wrong?
I don't
Sounds
think
right to me. It sounds a little circular, no matter which way we look at it.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess from my perspective too, like, should we is like a really dangerous question to be asking about the middle school model, because if we say no, we shouldn't, like, the next question would have to be, well, what should we do? Because we like are approaching this at all because we are trying to solve problems. So the school committee has already said, like,
We
should
intend to do this. That
right,
that is what
like,
we said.
yeah, and so, like, the question is, how should we, right? And certainly if there's a reason not to do it, we want to know, right? Like, that's fine. But you know, I do think, like, we have to alleviate the issues at the elementary schools. Like, we have to. And if absent, like, this being a solution, like, we need another solution. And I'm not sure the community is going to find it suitable to say, like, we have to undertake more building projects, right? So the consequences of saying no to something like that are pretty significant for our district and for our students. So I guess my question is, like, when we talk about, like, the big decisions that need to be made, like, there's, like, the big decisions, and then there's, like, operationalizing those big decisions. And that can take longer, but, like, for example, like, one of the things that we talked about was, like, if we're gonna do this, we want to give our elementary schools enough runway so that they know that they're going to graduate not just fifth graders next year, they're going to graduate fourth graders too. And that means something very particular to families, and it means something different in every building. And it's not like a thing that you can, like, whip up in April of next year. So, like, there's probably some progressive decision making that will have to happen on that committee. And not to mention, like, if there's construction and other things, like, those
Right.
things all, like, they don't happen in a minute. So I mean, to me, like, the strategic plan of the district right now is to solve that problem, right? Like, so, and
Yeah.
like, that's going to be the number one thing in terms of, like, work that we're going to do, because we're having to actively solve for it right now. So I don't think that's a problem. Like, if it overlaps, it doesn't bother me so much. If it, like, underlaps, it doesn't bother, like, the timing of that is going to not be perfect with this work, not unless we say we're not going to do this work until we're done with that. And that's like not ideal either. So I think we just have to sort of be okay with there being some, like there's overlap or, or contention in trying to do a lot of things at the same time. So I think that's okay. Like, I don't think that's an issue. And I think people are able to understand that, we can do more than one thing at a time. So I think that's okay.
I think overlap is our middle name at this
Yeah,
point.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
agreed, and I think that's why for our second meeting we're already going to be touring a facility so that we can fully aware that we have a shorter runway and need to be communicating and making plans, which is why we had to make sure that we had this meeting on site before the school year ended.
Yeah. Yeah.
'Cause this is the looking at the Andrews is saying, can we physically
Right.
take a school that houses 450 and have it house 600? Like it's that math. HMFH seems to think so, but we have to look at the spaces. That's what this next week's meeting.
Right. They seem to, they say we can, at the McGlynn, we're short a couple classrooms at the Andrews.
Yeah.
But we also walked through the Andrews and said, okay, this giant space.
Correct.
So, so I think a week from now, we will have answered or gotten much closer to answering that question. So I don't mean to make it sound like everything's up in the air until fall. We've had one meeting of this task force, and
Right.
there is a math question that we can solve.
Yeah.
Agree.
So for the strategic plan, then I think what I am hearing is like by the end of the school year, we'll have like a summary of the community input, and we'll have a timeline that says like when we intend for there to be an update of this, and that update and development of the plan is like February, because that like is before budget time, which is important. And strategic plans aren't meant to like be once and done. So if there's, some evolution that has to happen beyond February, I don't think that's necessarily like problem. And then really the rest of the year would be dedicated to like aligning the strategic plan to the budget and those budget priorities. So that, any initiatives can kick off. So I think that sounds to me like the right timeline based on what we're saying.
I would love to put a marker on that timeline for September of what will be accomplished before or over the summer. If like we said summer. Oh, I guess with the consultant, I think perhaps fingers crossed that this comes through and we can work with this consultant that knows us and loves us, and we love them, I assume. But
Well,
with them over the summer, talking with them about their process and to be able to say this is what's going to happen in the fall. I think that's an important piece of communication around how the strategic planning will play out.
That's what
leading
we're
up to
hopeful
February.
for. Would
Yeah.
you agree, Kim? That's what we're hopeful for.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and maybe what we can do is say that by like November, we want just like an interim update on what's happening, how's it going, where all these things sort of sitting and falling, and if we're still like on track for that original. Does that feel reasonable?
Yeah, I am way more comfortable providing updates as often as you want on the process. I'm just not comfortable setting like benchmarks about what's going to be done when without really like having met with the consultant, having them look at all the work we've done here, get to know us. So I feel like updates feels completely reasonable.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's fine.
We did say June for the current survey results, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And to be clear, are those survey results the results that community members responded to, remember, Graham, when you launched that in like December, January? Or
Yes,
are we
yeah.
talking about like the full, like all the times anyone's ever
No,
contributed?
no, just the strategic planning survey.
Yeah. I think it would be nice to have a list of those other things. If where information is available, where we would find it.
I can
I mean,
easily.
and I know a lot of it is in your interim presentation. Like, I think that's that's an asset that goes into, if there's a shared folder around this, like that goes there. There's the instructional vision goes there. The visioning session summaries might go there. I think we have
Yes.
some work to do in pulling out the themes of the survey responses, but knowing that there's other information in other documents, I think just a list of those documents would be helpful.
We can do that.
That's the plan.
And is there utility to explicitly pulling other district plans? I know we've all probably looked at them and seen them in passing. Is there value to calling out? We did this with the AI task force. It was saying, ah, yes, we like this about this policy and this about that policy. And
I guess my thought is like that would all be work we would expect a consultant working with us on this to do. And if there's not a consultant working with us, then yes, but
okay.
um that's where like we should lever their expertise.
Yeah, that feels right.
Okay.
Do we have a process or a goal to select a consultant already, or?
Yes. So, were you going to speak about that, Kim?
I was.
Yeah, go ahead. I saw the unmute go.
Yeah, so the Bar Foundation is the grantors, and they have a pre-approved list of technical consultants that they work with. And so one of them is Lynch Leadership, Spring Point is another one. And there's a third that also does consulting work on strategic plans. So Lynch Leadership also does work on strategic plans. So it will be, we can choose from their set of options. And as Suzanne mentioned, working with Lynch Leadership has been transformational for our high school and for some of the big changes we've seen in our middle school. So we're hoping to be able to continue to work with them in the capacity of setting a strategic plan.
We did strategic plan work when I was in Wilmington, and we had a wonderful consultant, and that's what drove and ran the whole process for it, and let us think about goals and, achievements and things that we wanted to do rather than the process. Otherwise you get bogged in the process. And
that's such a great point, because if we don't get the grant, or if we don't get that point of the grant, I would really urge this committee to think about a budget for a consultant, because like Ken, I've been part of districts that have done this sort of like grassroots, like we drive the process, and it is
spins and spins.
Oh.
It's painful.
And a consultant can really like
Yeah.
leverage the expertise and like just let us be thinkers and not necessarily like designers and editors and writers.
It was actually Meg, Suzanne, was our consultant.
Oh, that my coach.
Yes. She didn't,
She
she led the process in a way without telling us what we needed to think and set for goals and priorities. She just focused us and moved us and organized and corralled us when necessary. And,
Well, I'm still very optimistic about the bar grant proposal. We will know in June, but that's good feedback to hear, and I'm sure it's another layer of resource at our fingertips if we need.
I will also ask while we're all here, Joan will be retiring in September, and just to make sure that we capture her thoughts here and make sure that that plays in with the deep knowledge you have of
Yeah,
Medford.
absolutely. I'm here till September, so you have me as long as you need me.
There aren't enough journals for us trying to capture what Joan has in her head.
It's September of 2027, right?
Sure.
We're building a storage locker, so we've for Joan, so I think we'll be good.
Okay. There are other questions from the committee? We can provide this update to the school committee at our next meeting. And I've been meaning to I had started pulling together some findings out of the survey data. So I just need to return to that and maybe we can schedule another quick meeting to look at a report before it goes to the
Yeah,
school
should
committee.
we all kind of do that independently? I know we all have all three of us have our approaches to or I don't want to, I want to make good use of people's time or
Yeah, and we do have to do these things in public meeting, which is
Right.
a little bit painful. So why don't I will put something together and then we can make sure that we have some time for everybody to review it before and the data before we meet, and then we can have a meeting where we go through the editing process.
yeah, I mean, yes, we all have the spreadsheet
Yeah.
that we can look at and
Okay.
Jessica, you're making. Did you have anything to say about the survey? And the
No, I
spreadsheet?
was trying to remember if I had access to the spreadsheet. I couldn't remember if it was before January or after January, but I think I do.
We can make sure you have access.
Yeah.
I know you love a spreadsheet.
Very good at a spreadsheet.
Okay. So let me do that and then I will find another date for us all to get back together again and we can go from there.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we have got access on February 1st is what it looks like. No, January 29th.
Okay.
Is that meeting after, when in June are we going to hear about from Bar Foundation, or
I believe
shouldn't
it's
schedule this
early-
around that?
I can double check with Marta Cabral, but I believe it's early June. Isn't it by the 6th? Or the 5th?
Saturday.
Yeah, I think maybe it's the 5th. It's right around the beginning of June.
I mean, we have to do the survey work either way.
Yeah.
And I think obviously there's a lot going on with the high school, which Member Graham, I know is, well, everyone on this call, but
But I think we should target the June 15th school committee meeting to do this because that would give us at least a little runway between finding out about the Bar Foundation if we have to make any adjustments to the plan before we present to the school committee.
Mm-hmm.
all right. So one meeting to look at this data.
Before then.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Yes, I can make that.
By Erica. Is there a second?
Second?
Jessica, I will call the roll. Jenny Graham, yes. Erica Reinfeld,
Yes.
Jessica Parks,
Yes.
3 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative. Meeting is adjourned.